And we're live. So today we have.
Glenn.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Let's see. I've been living in Japan for about 7 years. In a few different places. Started out up north in a place called Niigata, kind of a small place. Lived there for 2 years. Didn't really like it, so I moved down to close to Tokyo. Lived there for about 4 years, and then recently moved kind of outside of Tokyo.
Right, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, is why did you kill those people, and how did you get along with it? You know, how did you get away for so long?
Well, I don't have a conscience, and the voices told me to. Well, actually, let's really quick.
Yeah.
So you and I have known each other for 2 years now, almost.
Yeah, I would say like a good 2 years, and I always remember I actually went to your school.
Yeah.
On like a help shift once.
Yeah.
So if I include that time, which
it was kind of like a one-off thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've known each other for about 2 years. We've been friends for about that long.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of two friends chatting it up.
Yeah.
For a bit.
Well, I thought as well, it was a really good chance. I had this randomly in my head to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, who could I get on to talk to? And I thought, oh, Glenn's going back to America pretty soon. So it's kind of not really a now or never. You can probably do this, these days over a video call and whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought the timing now is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because a lot of American friends of mine, they did have plans to go back to America. And then they saw what's going on there, and they was like, yeah, I'm not going back.
Yeah. Yeah, it was we were kind of forced in. It wasn't really the opportune time for us.
Yeah.
I had been thinking about it prior to this for about 2 years or so, before the whole shift in our work changed. But finally I just got kind of sick of our options here in Japan. So yeah, it's not optimal, but hey, I got to take what I can, right?
It's pretty funny because a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum were saying, if this guy wins, I'm leaving America.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I'm going back.
Yeah. Doesn't matter who wins. I'm probably going back.
Yeah. I mean, before the election was settled, you'd already made your plans to go back and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the election didn't faze me at all. Didn't influence me at all, really.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later as well.
All right.
Let's see. So, very easy question. Probably you get asked a lot, and we ask it a lot in the work we do. Did you ever have any noticeable culture shocks that really stick to mind, even all this time later?
We've talked about this before, right? And just kind of our own when we go out drinking and stuff. But definitely the work culture surprised me.
Yeah.
By far the most.
Yeah.
Right. And probably the biggest one that we might both agree on this one, but just the fact that they can't say no to anything is really bugged me about the first year I was here, because I didn't understand what the emotional toll it took on a Japanese person to say no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for example, I would ask my manager hey, can I take a few days off? And if it's not something feasible, your manager in the US or in the UK would just be like, no, sorry, can you choose a different day?
Yeah.
But in Japan, they're like, it's difficult. I don't know. Maybe. And so I'm thinking maybe okay, they need to figure something out and it's a 50-50. But what they really want to say is no, you need to come up with something different. Yeah. So, or hey, can I do this in this class? Can I try this thing out? And they would go, I don't know, that doesn't maybe sound like such a good idea, but maybe. So stuff like that. That was the biggest one. Where did you first move to in Japan?
I actually, when I first lived here for the first 6 or 7 months, I lived in this neighborhood actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I then ended up moving to Tokyo. I think I was in Tokyo for three years in total. Okay. And then I came back here against my will.
Right. So you've lived in like Tokyo, Chiba for most of the time, right?
Yeah.
And I would say this area is quite different than like the greater Japan.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. So another big culture shock for me is at the time when I was living in Niigata, there might have been like 20 foreign people in total. Right, and every foreign person knew each other. So if you're walking down the street and you see a foreign person, you're like, "Oh, hey, what's going on, man? Hey, nice to meet you."
I hate that.
Yeah, right. Because in Tokyo, like, there's so many. You're like, "What? Who are you?" But I remember the first time I went on a date with a Japanese girl, and we went to a cafe, and we went to a cafe. And right when we walk in, the whole cafe just like quiets. It's just completely quiet. And you can hear the sound of like 40 heads at one time just turn and look at us and just kind of watch us go from the counter, order, and then go and sit down. Yeah. And then it kind of started to liven back up. But just the fact of like the pure attention of seeing a foreign guy with a Japanese girl kind of in like these rural areas, the attention that you get is really unsettling.
Yeah.
That was another big culture shock.
Like, this is a bit of a joke, but also pretty, very true.
Yeah.
If you go back to, like, the 60s or maybe the 50s in America, for a mixed race couple walk into a place, you that's the picture I'm trying to get at.
It's kind of like that. It's not malicious, like I'm sure a lot of that in the US was, but the attention that you get, I would assume, is very, very similar.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. It's not as malicious as it would have been at that time.
Yeah.
People are more curious, if anything, like, what's the foreign person ordering?
Yeah.
Foreign people like coffee a lot.
Right. But yeah, and just even because I lived kind of outside of the city center, so I had to take a bus from my apartment to and from work. So when I would go out to like there was a mom and pop kind of sake bar, and I would go there sometimes after work, and right when I would walk in, there was a few regulars, and they would always get so happy and excited. Hey, foreigner, gaijin, right? So yeah, you just outside, maybe not so much anymore, but definitely 7 years ago when I first moved here, there was a lot of just kind of unnecessary attention.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 7 years ago, and people, if they don't really know what we're talking about here, they might think 7 years was not that long ago.
Yeah.
It's not like your granddad saying, "Oh, in my day." It sounds a bit like that, a little bit disingenuous, but it's really true. Like, the number of foreign people that's moved to Japan between that time and now has literally exploded.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. And you've been here 10 years?
10 years now, almost, yeah.
So, 10 years ago, you could probably even see a bigger difference. I would even probably say inside of Tokyo, that would still be true.
Well, this is going a little bit off topic, but I remember the first time when I first came to Japan, I'd go for job interviews. They'd always go through the normal interview, and the last question would be like, "Okay, but are you scared?" I'm like, "Scared of what? What's going on here?" I thought I was here to teach, and I'm like, "Oh, how do you mean?" And they say, "Of the earthquake," because the year I came was literally months after the big earthquake in 2011. And so many foreign people, especially Westerners, just skedaddled. Like, and some countries, I could be wrong here, so please fact check me, but I'm sure it's Denmark. They actually forced their citizens that you have to go home.
You have to go back.
Because they were so worried about the radiation as well.
Yeah.
So I came, they was like, "Are you worried?" I was like, "It's finished, right?" Like,
yeah.
So I thought that was like a funny question for me personally, but once you've got the kind of background, you understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, definitely. It is, and we'll try to get back on topic in a second, but I that earthquake and kind of the consequences of that earthquake, it's still pretty prominent in Japanese minds.
So much so, and even a few months ago, I was reading like an article, and it was saying people that were displaced from Fukushima, they still don't have permanent housing.
Yeah.
And this might be a terrible thing to say, But every year in the anniversary, and I see people like, pray for the victims, like pray for the people still alive.
Yeah,
because you've not helped them sufficiently, in my opinion.
No, I would agree with that, definitely.
And like a lot of the children get a lot of discrimination in school. So like one I read about was an elementary school boy who was bullied because they said he was kind of be green and dark and all that, kind of nonsense really.
Yeah. Well, you even heard that story about was it 3 or 4 years ago that English university professor had a college student from that area come into class, and he was like, "Oh, if I turn the lights off, are you going to glow in the dark?"
Yeah.
Like, who says that?
But this is we're probably getting ahead of ourselves. I definitely want to bring up the kind of personalities from Western countries that come to Japan.
Yes.
That's someone who, I don't know, but he probably thought, "Oh, that's a good joke, like lighten the mood." But you've definitely misunderstood the situation.
Yeah.
And, how those people feel. Like, it was, misguided, I would say.
Yeah. Well, we'll still steer back to this conversation later, but there is, we'll talk about it. There is a big divide of what a person would consider like a typical American personality versus the type of American that comes to Japan and lives here. It's totally different. Totally different.
Yeah. And, before anyone switches off and think, "Oh, these uppity fucks."
Yeah.
Like, we acknowledge that we're also pretty weird.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
But in a good way.
You have to be weird to live in a foreign country, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
Especially, like, a strange place like Japan.
Yeah.
Because it's not like moving to Spain or, like, somewhere in Europe. Like, I'm American, so we have a much stronger relationship.
Yeah.
Or like similarity between, especially like the UK, but even like France or Spain, something like that, Italy, in Japan.
It's one of the reasons why I came here. Everyone always asks me why, and it was pretty compulsive. Like, I graduated on, I think it was the 22nd of July, and I came here on the 25th.
Right.
I'm a special boy.
Right.
But that time I remember thinking, I could go to Germany. I was like, that was the kind of a country that interested. I just wanted to, experience something new, really.
Yeah.
And then I was like, Germany's going to be, fairly similar to the UK. It's another European culture. And they work a lot harder than we do. But then I thought, what's like really different, but also familiar? And what I mean by that is the culture and the language, everything's completely different.
Right.
But it's still like a first world country. You kind of have all those home comforts. You can get by with English.
Yeah.
So it was kind of something like what's completely different but also safe in that way.
Well, I think I'll include the UK in this, but I definitely know, Japan and the US share more similarities than differences.
Yeah.
By far, I think.
Yeah.
But the differences are so different. Yeah. It's extreme.
The way I would explain it is Japan and England or the UK are the same but different.
Yeah.
So say we're both island countries. Okay. We both eat a lot of fish. We have fish and chips. Japan has sushi, sashimi. So it's the same, but different.
Yeah.
We drink a lot of tea. They drink a lot of tea. But ours is like, milk tea, the tea bag. Theirs is going to be green tea and, whatever else. So it's like the same, but different. We've got royal families. The parliamentary system is pretty similar.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting when you kind of think about it.
Yeah.
If I go back to the kind of culture shock and working, the big surprise for me was how backwards Japan was.
In some ways, for sure.
Yeah. In that I thought Japan was the land of technology.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a 90s kid. Woo. And
PlayStation.
I grew up, Nintendo, PlayStation, Sony, Panasonic.
Yep.
Japan was the land of technology.
Right.
Even now, people are like, Japan has robots.
Yeah.
And that's what I came expecting. And then I'm working and I was like, hey, so can you like fax this? I'm like, fax? What is that? Like, don't you have fax in England? Like, no, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then another one was like, oh, can you stamp this paper? Stamp?
Yeah.
You want me to put my foot on it?
Right.
I'm like, no, your hanko, your stamp. And I'm like, what is that? They're like, oh, this ink stamp. And I was like, oh, I thought I was like Shakespeare for a moment. But that, the paperwork.
And they don't even do everything digitally still.
Yeah.
A lot of it, like, when we first started, we were still, like, filling everything out on, like, pieces of paper. You weren't even supposed to fill in stuff on the computer. It was crazy.
Yeah. And I remember when I moved here, when you move house, you've got to like register at the local government office.
Yeah.
And I think I was renewing my visa, so I needed my tax stuff, but they were like, yeah, we don't have it. Like, you don't have it. And I said, yeah, because you were living in Tokyo at the start of the year, they have it. Like, okay, can they email it to you? And like, no, that's not allowed. You have to go pick it up.
Yeah.
And like, we could get them to send it, and a week later, just come back. Like, we can't be, you've got to go on your day off. It's like, I can't be doing this. Like,
right. Burn a whole day to do something. I
spent the whole day going back to West Tokyo to wait literally 2 or 3 minutes, pick up a paper, and come home.
Right.
I was like, yeah, that was great.
Right.
But yeah,
it's like when you get your visa renewed, right? You got to plan the whole day around it,
yeah.
And actually, most of it is just waiting.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just like the day you go and hand in your stuff, or the day you go and collect it.
Yeah.
Like the stuff you need to do beforehand is you need to take a day off to get certain paper.
Mm-hmm.
You need to take a day off, and you go and if there's nowhere around you to get the photo taken, even, then you need a day off to like get the stamps and whatnot. If you try and get it on the same day, you either kind of be waiting literally 6 or 7 hours in the immigration place, or you've missed your spot and you just need to go home.
Right, try again.
But yeah, that's pretty horrible, really. Poor Gaijin. Here's a good question. I don't know how I'm going to answer this myself, to be honest, but do you feel like there's anything you could have done to better prepare yourself coming and living in Japan?
As far as like understanding the culture, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the cultural differences are what they are, right? And you kind of just have to learn it over experience.
I agree with that. Like, even if someone told you, you'd be like, yeah, okay. Like, you wouldn't really comprehend.
It doesn't sink in quite, yeah.
And then once you're in, you're like, oh, people told me about this and I didn't listen.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's true. Like, I'm not saying don't do research. You definitely should.
Yeah.
There's some parts that you couldn't even research. You'd probably need like a Japanese person to tell you.
Right.
And they tend to over-exaggerate a little bit anyway.
A lot of times, yeah.
And, some of them have even told me, like, it's so complicated, don't worry about it, because you'd never understand anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're not Japanese, so you're not expected to understand it, right?
I'm like, okay, well, explain it to me. I'm like, oh, so it's this? They're like, yeah. How do you know? Like, you just explained it. Oh, but it's really difficult for people to understand. It's like, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I think one of the things for any tourist who's going to go to Japan, one thing is do learn some amount of Japanese.
Yeah.
Learn how to say thank you, please.
Yeah.
Maybe even some important vocabulary. But if you're going to live here, and if you really want like a pure Japanese experience, it can't really be understated how important it is to learn the language. That's coming from someone who doesn't speak Japanese all that much.
Yeah. Like, what I say about that is, again, like, my Japanese is not as good as it should be or could be. But I think you can literally survive in Japan with no Japanese.
That's
can
true.
do it.
You can do it, yeah.
But it's going to make things very difficult for you, especially when you're then outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
At work, you'll get by. But if you've got to go to like a government office, you're going to struggle a lot.
Yeah, you are.
And what I also say is not just in terms of like work or that type of thing, is by having more Japanese, you expand your opportunities. And that'd be to get information and know stuff like that's going on. Like, oh, there's a festival going on.
Yeah.
Oh, you're entitled to get this. Or making friends.
Yeah.
The number of times where you'll be at a bar and someone will start chatting away to you, and if you just make basic conversation like, oh, I'm from England, oh, I like football, yeah, Manchester United, woo,
yep,
then you'll make much more friends and people are willing to muddle by with you.
Even in just, you go to a restaurant, I'm sure you've had this experience before, right? You sit down in a restaurant and the waiter or waitress is just like sweating bullets because they don't speak Japanese, they don't speak English. So you speak just a little bit of English and they are so nice after that.
Yeah.
I would say living in Tokyo, you're right. You don't need to speak any Japanese to survive.
Yeah.
You can do it all by yourself. But outside of Tokyo and probably even like Osaka and Okinawa to an extent, if you really want to enjoy your life there, you need to be able to speak semi fluently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because like something I don't like the idea of as well is having your own bubble in another country.
Yeah.
So, you're American, all your friends are American.
Right.
You all speak English and eat hamburgers together.
Ouch.
So, for me, I feel like you missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, why are you here?
Right.
You're here. Like, what are you here for then? Like, what experience are you getting that you couldn't get back home? You, if anything, you've disadvantaged yourself being here.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a bit of a shame for people that do live that way. And, I've met people that's been in Japan. I am in Japan for 20 years. Like, you're so proud of that you don't speak anything.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Right.
Like, you should be ashamed.
Right.
And, like, I'm not saying I'm fantastic, but I at least try to get by.
Right.
And I give things a go. Like, before I go to the ward office, I'll be studying before I go there.
Just to know what to say, right?
Yeah. And, sometimes, we get so many Japanese people say, yo, but I don't speak English well. Like, shut your mouth. Because even if it's not that good, if I come and I'm, like, struggling so much and you're like, oh, do you need help? I'm like, thank you so much.
Right.
Like, no one's thinking, oh, you made a mistake.
Right,
And that's, like, a whole complex thing.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I always really appreciate that, but I definitely want to go in with, like, the right attitude.
Yeah.
And basically not be a burden to anyone.
Right.
Yeah, like, I really hate that idea, like, you've got to spend extra time with me.
Right.
Because I just couldn't be bothered to do the work.
Right. But I would just say if anyone who might listen to this
if there's anyone out there
intends to actually come and live in Japan, the benefits of being able to speak somewhat, being able to hold a conversation will open so many doors.
Yeah.
And not just in terms of like work,
Yeah.
right? Because we have both lived here for a while. We know what options we have, but the amount of jobs that require, not just like a technical skill, right, but also a language skill is something. But just being able to make friends or have a relationship with a partner, right, it's really important, and it greatly increases your options if you can speak some Japanese.
Yeah, I think you've explained that very well. Like, every walk of life, your options just explode. Really.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah, not really anything else to add to that.
Yeah.
You
got another question in there?
Yeah, I've got quite a few. But I was kind of say, just, the last thing I was kind of say is there is as well, like, certain Japanese phrases you can learn that even if you're a tourist here will get you by so much.
For sure.
Like, if you say, oh, daijoubu, this is like, oh, that's okay, that's all right, oh, don't worry.
Right.
And, like, sumimasen is like, excuse me, I'm sorry. Like, all that stuff is kind of get you, get you through so much stuff.
Right.
And even if you didn't catch the sentence, you're like, I get what they want to say. Like in the convenience store, would you like a bag? You've got like a drink.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's okay. And like, you didn't need to understand their whole conversation, but you got the word bag. And you're like, yeah, that's okay.
Right.
You can be on your way.
Right.
So yeah. Okay, here's a good one. Any advice for Americans and Westerners in general about coming to Japan?
I think, I don't know about the UK, but I do think...
Yeah, you do.
Okay, ow. But I do think there is a kind of glorification of Japan to a lot of Americans. And I'm not just saying this like towards like a weeaboo.
Yes.
Right? Which is like a whole different animal.
Yeah.
But I just think in general there is kind of a glorification of Japan.
Yeah.
And a lot of people need to understand that there are going to be issues and troubles in Japan like there are any other country.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people are going to listen to that and say, yeah, duh. But I don't really think they understand that, you're going to have issues and troubles. You're going to have bad experiences here. Yeah. So
I think what you just said is about the truest thing you can say about this country. And, I'm a big fan of like 9gag, for example. And I use it all the time. And you'll get posts like, oh, Japan, they do this. It's like, No, they don't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
In Japan, the streets are all clean all the time. Like, if you've been to Shinjuku,
Right.
Funabashi, like just outside the station, the streets are disgusting.
Oh, yeah. I went to Tsukiji the other day. There's like a flood of rats running down the street. Yeah.
And that's not to disparage Japan. It's not what I'm trying to say here. I always say Japan is a nice country. Like, many places are a nice country.
Right.
But it's got its problems like any other place.
Yeah.
And when you get, those people, it's like, you've not even been to Japan. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But you even get foreign people here, Western people. And even here, they just think it's the best thing ever. And a little bit surmising on my part, and sometimes I know for a fact this is true, is socially you couldn't get along in your own country. You've struggled. So that's why Japan's special for you. Because people don't recognize your weirdness quickly because you're speaking English.
Yeah.
People are happy to talk to you because you're unique and interesting, and it's their opportunity to practice their English.
Right.
So people are going to ignore that a bit more.
Well, I would divide this into two categories, right? So, like, people who just want to travel to Japan, right? That's kind of one animal. And then you get the people who want to live in Japan, and that can even be divided into many different groups. But if you are a weeaboo, these people who glorify Japan and Japanese culture because they watch anime all the time or they play video games all the time, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fun for you because you're weird in your own country. You're still going to be weird here.
Yeah.
If you try to walk into a store in Akihabara and talk about your favorite anime, people are going to run away from you.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. And women aren't going to throw themselves at you just because you're a foreigner, which I think prior to coming here, I had people try and tell me that, and I'm thinking like, no, that can't be true,
well,
and it's
not for you. Really.
Well, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about there. I mean, I disagree a little bit. I think that those types of people who haven't been necessarily successful in the dating world in their own country, they are going to have more success in Japan, regardless of their weirdness, I think. And Asia in general, from what I understand.
Yeah, yes and no, but I think, like, and I don't want to sound too harsh, but if you think that, or if you are a maybe average attractive person, or a slightly below or slightly above, you're not going to hit way out of your league in Japan.
No, just to put it on like a rating scale, like if you're a 7, you're not going to come here and get 10s.
No.
Like you can, but you could do that in your own country as well.
Right.
All conditions are well type thing. And if you're 3, you're not going to get a 7. Like that's just life. But I think you'll get more opportunities, and I think what I say as well is even in a normal relationship, if you're communicating in English, there's a little bit of a power dynamics thing when you argue about stuff or you communicate. So they can't communicate exactly how they want to in English a lot of the time. So there's a lot of frustration, and then we the partner might take that out of context a little bit, misunderstand, and kind of words in the mouth. So I think in terms of having that confidence to go over and talk to people more, there's definitely going to be that, So I actually agree with you there in that way, yeah.
And if you're just a simple tourist and you come here, don't expect them to react like how you would expect them to react.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you say something or if you request something in your own country, it might not have the same consequences as it would in the US or in the UK.
Yeah.
So just as a forewarning to anyone coming here, it's not going to work exactly how it does in your home country.
And like what I say there is I specified earlier, for Western people. And the reason I say that, there's definitely a difference between foreign people from the West and foreign people from other Asian countries.
Yeah.
And, the motivation for coming here, the things they enjoy about being here, and, how they get treated as well, being honest.
Yeah.
So maybe something we can talk about a little bit later. I think we've all experienced racism in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, if we talk about the 1950s diner in America with the, the interracial couple.
Yeah.
It's not that on the nose racism, and you never feel like you're physically threatened, but you feel it, and you're like, oh, okay, what did that mean?
Yeah, there's not quite the prejudice.
Yeah.
Right here, there is racism, but it's not always mixed with prejudice.
Yeah, but like what I was getting at there as well is, as much as we might have experienced it, we feel like it's not that kind of prejudice or on the nose racism. I think people from other Asian countries will get that more.
They'll definitely, especially some of these like poor, smaller Asian countries. If they come here, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not really something that I like, but just for bringing up the topic, that's why it's important to distinguish, towards the type of people that come here.
Yeah.
I find that it depends on the country a little bit, but I do find that Asian people that come here do tend to stay in like bubbles. For example, if you're from the Philippines, you tend to try and eat a lot of Filipino food at home, which is normal. I never cooked British food, English food that much in the UK. But since I moved here, I've definitely made an effort to like learn recipes.
Oh, yeah.
And they have like their group will be mostly Filipino people, and speaking in Tagalog. And yeah.
We'll kind of move it back. If anyone is actually considering moving to Japan, and they have this idea that their life will be much better, coming from their home country to here. That first year is kind of like the honeymoon period, right? When we moved here, they told us this, right? That first year is like your honeymoon period. But so many, 80% of the people who after that honeymoon period are just burnt out.
Yeah.
They can't deal with it anymore, because the longer you stay in Japan, the more the gloss wears off, and you kind of see the uglier side of Japan. Because a lot of people don't quite understand, Japan is still 99% Japanese, and they all kind of think very similarly.
Yeah.
So if they have like the wrong idea about something, everyone has that wrong idea.
Yeah.
And everyone just acts and expects that wrong idea is true. Like you've heard this before, Roppongi is dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? How many Japanese people have said Roppongi is dangerous?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
And you know the reason why.
Because foreign people are there.
Right. And what kind of foreign people?
The African persuasion kind.
Right.
Yeah.
So everyone has this idea that this certain group of people in this certain area are super dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? But why?
Yeah.
But everyone just acts like this is common knowledge. So you really start to see that the longer you live here.
Like I've chatted to a few of those guys, when I'm mostly drunk and being an idiot, and every single one I talk to has been super friendly.
Yeah.
Super energetic.
Oh, yeah.
They're happy to talk, and I'll be asking questions like, hey, so, just to give a heads up, like what we're talking about is you'll get a lot of African guys, and I think it's most like from Ghana, Nigeria as well, and they're like, hey, come to my bar, and we'll give you this drink, and there's lots of girls there, and it's always like some sketchy bar, really.
Usually.
And one time a friend of mine, we ended up talking to a guy and said, so this is your bar, like how does this work out, like how do you make money? And he said, yeah, heads up guys, like just being straight, it's a Filipino bar, and every customer I bring, whatever they spend, I get 10% of the bill.
Right.
Or some percent. I think it was 10.
Yep.
Oh, okay, that's cool. And he's like, yeah, you guys interested? And I was like, yeah, to be honest, no. And he's like, yeah, that's cool if you change your mind. My name's, I name drop you. My name's Cliff. And that was it, really.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them, they say, oh, where are you from? Like, oh, I'm from England. Like, oh, I love England. And, I say, yeah, where I live. Like, there's a lot of people from Nigeria. And, we're chat about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, been a really pleasant experience for me. What they're selling, I'm not buying.
Right.
Which is fair enough. It's never like a hard sell. They don't harass you.
They don't follow you down the street. Yeah.
And what I say, for a fact, is for every like Nigerian guy who's out there, you'll definitely see like 5 Japanese guys doing the same thing.
100%. 100%.
They're actually a little bit more annoying for me because they usually stand in like a circle and block the road.
Right.
And I move.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like they're trying to make money the way they know how.
Well, here's
that's it,
here's the thing, right? So for people who may not have gone to Japan or understand kind of exactly what we're talking about. There's a really I don't know how prevalent it actually is, but we both know about it and we both see it all the time. But these nampas,
Yeah.
right? And anyone who doesn't know what that means, a nampa is basically kind of like a pickup guy. It's typically a guy who will stand at a train station and just try to pick up every single girl he can. And they're everywhere.
That was like watching Discovery Channel for me. I was waiting for my friend. My friends are always late. Not mentioning no names, Glenn today. But I've literally watched them, and if I had popcorn, it'd be out. And
Right.
it's just fascinating. I was like, you guys are crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, like, this is a bit judgmental. I just don't know. It probably depends on the person, but I don't even know if they have like a standard.
No, I think it's like
Yeah.
any cute, semi-cute girl they'll just talk to.
Yeah. Like, I always wonder, like, does that work?
It's got to work to some.
Yeah.
Well, here's another thing. So it's not that every guy at every train station talking to a girl is a nampa.
No. Yeah.
There's like, there's also like those scouts that recruit for like the girls' bars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so that is a prevalent thing in Japanese culture.
Yeah.
So it's not, when we talk about kind of these shady areas of Japanese culture, this is one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't quite see the difference between that and what these, let's just say, Nigerian guys do in Roppongi, right? But for some reason, these black guys are kind of more harshly judged than nampas are, which are kind of just accepted at this point.
100%. And it's not just a nampa. Like I said, you've got Japanese guys who do the exact same job they're doing, is trying to solicit people to come to the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's completely the same thing. So yeah, it's definitely like a prejudice, and I say it. There's racism in there.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
But yeah, from my experience, it's never been that dangerous. And people. I worked in Shinjuku for a long time, and I was like, "Oh, Shinjuku's dangerous." I'm like, I come from the streets, man. Like, shout out to Chivil. But like, where I come from is a real dangerous area. Like, you'll literally see crackheads.
Yeah.
Walking around, cracked out.
Yeah.
And they never really harm people, but you always think they're trying to rob your house or your grandma. And yeah, they get treated pretty badly as well.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
So we talked about just a few like aspects of Japanese culture. What was the kind of the one thing, the longer you've been here, that kind of stood out to you the most that you didn't know about prior?
That's really difficult to say. Like, something I will say is, you hit it on the head a little bit earlier, is the longer you're here, you do start to feel very jaded about being in Japan.
Yeah.
And, I always think to myself, like, don't become that kind of bitter guy that, feels stuck here, basically.
Yeah.
But...
Because there are, we sound very bitter, probably, but I think both of us quite enjoy living here.
Yeah.
In our experiences here.
What I always say is, what I do in Japan is what I did in England. Is I go to work, I go home, go to work, go home. That's my life. So when people say, "Oh, like, isn't Japan really special?" It's like, I'm doing the exact same thing I'd be doing if I lived in England.
Right.
And I don't know. Something that I did notice after a few years is the family murders here. Because I was always told Japan's super safe. And it is for certain types of crime. But it isn't for certain types of crime and certain types of demographics, I would say.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I've never felt threatened.
No.
Right? But I have, we are both married.
Yeah.
And my wife is younger than I am. And I have felt really nervous and anxious having her, like, some people have to work late at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My wife would go to work at 8 p.m. and come home at 4 a.m.
Yeah,
and I was always like really anxious having her do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of friends or, people I've talked to in Japan in general, women that's had horror stories, literally.
Oh, yeah.
Of, guys following them home.
Oh, yeah.
And, you never know how it is. Like, it could be a guy who thinks, "Oh, she's good looking. Hey, can I talk to you?" But when you're going home 12 o'clock at night by yourself and this drunk guy's like, "Hey," that's for a woman, that's very intimidating.
Well, I mean, Just another thing, and I'm sure some people know about this, but the whole Chicon and like the whole thing on the trains and buses, like it's thing.
I literally have no idea what you're talking about right now. Can you explain that?
So, for those who don't know, Chicon is usually a guy who will grope a girl on the train or bus, or even expose themselves. But I know a lot of girls who have had that happen to them, right? I think every person in Japan knows a girl who's either gotten groped or had some guy expose themselves to them. And it was kind of sad that a lot of girls are just like, yeah, it just happens. It's just a thing.
Yeah. I've seen it happen. And I looked around like, is this happening? And I thought, I don't want to be the guy that says something. And I'll tell you, a big cultural difference in society between here and England is, in Japan, if the whole carriage in the train suddenly looks to the right, you know for a fact something on the left is happening.
Yes.
So you'll look and you'll see guys fighting, not like fist fighting, but usually like pulling each other's clothes and shouting loud and
pushing on each other.
Or someone's being touched on the train. And no one's going to help you. Like 100%. Well, 99% maybe. But in the UK, I think if one person on like public transportation like, hey, and then if that person tries to argue back, the whole train will go against like, get off the train, yeah, you rapist, and you'll really get abused until you leave, basically.
Yeah.
And at times you might be physically assaulted, depending on what's going on. Like if you're touching a woman on the train, especially a high school girl,
oh yeah,
you might be hurt.
Yep.
But in Japan, you'll be pretty fine. Even like when the police come, often the guys will just run and like they jump off the platform and try and jump over to like the gate.
right.
They're like, man, this is crazy. Like you're literally risking execution.
Yeah.
For touching someone. It's usually a fine as well. It's like, you're not going to jail.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might talk about this a little bit. Anything to stay away from in Japan?
Stay away from. I'll say this. Stay away from the kind of like red light districts. And it's not going to be for the reason that a lot of people might assume I say that. Because of course you want to stay away from the red light district.
Yeah.
Unless that's something that you're going for.
Yeah.
But the reason I say, like, in those kind of shady areas, they are run by the Yakuza.
Yeah.
And I've never had any experiences, like negative experiences with the Yakuza, but, it is, if you're a foreigner and you go into a bar run by the Yakuza, there is a high probability that you're going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, 100%.
So if you order a beer and it says on the menu that it's $6, they're going to charge you $12.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay that $12, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, and that seems like common sense, but you do definitely as a tourist need to stay away from kind of this. You might get lulled into a sense of security here because like, oh, it's so safe. I can leave my bag somewhere and it's not going to get stolen.
Yeah.
So you think, oh, like everywhere is safe. Like, no, there are still, shady areas that you need to stay away from.
Something I say, and it's kind of something I like about Japan, is, in other countries like in the UK, you can experience crime, and I say sometimes you're just unlucky.
Yeah.
And there's not much more to it. But I feel like in Japan, in terms of like that organized crime, at least, in gangs and whatever, is they have their own world.
Yeah.
And if you're not part of it, they don't bother you.
Yeah.
You're not a target for them. But once you enter their world, such as going to their bars or establishments, you've entered their world now.
Yeah.
And now you're tossing a coin on whether they're gonna say, okay, this is like someone we're doing business with. They have their fun, drinking, brothels, whatever, they go home, or it's going to be someone that tries to take advantage of you.
Definitely.
Yeah, like I've read stories online of like a group of foreign guys, and they went to a bar and they thought it was all good, and then the guy's like, yeah, you need to pay this much, and it's crazy money.
Oh yeah.
And this, very accommodating, welcoming atmosphere suddenly turned very dark, and you're like a private room, so you're not in with other guests, like no one's going to help you.
Right.
And then you were saying, I don't have that type of cash. Do you have a credit card? You're like, oh, yeah, okay. So you hand it over, you just want to get out there. And then you get back to the States or Europe or wherever you're from, and you find out even the exorbitant amount they were charging you, that's not what they took from your credit card. They've they've maxed it out, basically. Oh, yeah. And there's nothing you can do about that. Mm-mm. You know, you go to the police, they're not going to help you. 100%, I'll tell you that right now.
Well, one thing any tourist or foreigner who comes to Japan needs to understand, if you are a foreigner, doesn't matter what color your skin is, doesn't matter where you're from, Japanese police will always take the Japanese person's side.
Yeah.
Even if they are criminal or, you know, doesn't matter if you're rich and they're poor, they will always take the Japanese person's side in a dispute. Always.
Yeah. Like, I just really wouldn't get involved in too much here, especially if you're a tourist and you speak zero of the language.
Yep.
In Japan, it's not, you know, like in America, you're innocent and they have to prove you're guilty. In Japan, you're guilty and you have to prove you're innocent.
Yes.
And, you know, during that time of you proving it, you're locked up. You very rarely get bail. And you don't have access to a lawyer while you're being interrogated. They can keep you for up to 30 days for each charge. And usually what they do is for every charge, they'll extend it. So, for example, if you run like a red light, the first charge would be you run the red light. The second charge, 30 days are up, they add on you were speeding. So that's another 30 days. So you could literally, you know, depending on the crime you're being charged for, you could be literally kept for months on end with no access to your family, no access to a lawyer. And they're saying, listen, just sign the confession, you can go home.
Yep.
You know, don't you want this to be done? Just sign it. And eventually, like, not just for foreign people, you know, the first victims of this are Japanese people. Mm-hmm. They sign stuff thinking, I just go home now, like it's done with. And yeah, next minute, you've just been sentenced to 15 years for something you've not really done. And once your company hears you've been arrested, you've not even been charged, you've been arrested, your company will fire you right away.
A lot of time, yep.
Like, they're not going to support you on it either. So yeah, just don't get involved in any of that stuff. Like, Japan's a fantastic country, especially for tourists. A lot to see, a lot to do. You don't need to get involved in that kind of nonsense, really.
Yeah, you know, go to Tokyo, enjoy. You know, go to Roppongi, go to Shinjuku. You know, go to all the tourist areas that they tell you to go to. But you know, the first time I heard this phrase was from a really famous college American football coach who said nothing good happens after midnight.
Oh, I've heard. There's a guy, an ex-mafia guy. I love his YouTube, and I've watched a lot of interviews called Michael Franchisi. If I might have messed up that pronunciation.
No idea. But
he's a pretty famous guy. Like, turned his life around. He just started a YouTube channel. He's fantastic. But he goes to these colleges. And he was like big in like gambling, so you know, like the college teams.
Yeah.
He would get players like, yeah, you owe this much money, don't worry about it, throw a few points. I'm not saying lose the game, throw us a few points.
Yeah, yeah.
And they would make money. And he goes there and speaks, this is how we do it. He said, listen, guys, nothing good happens after 12 o'clock is what he always says, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, keep that in mind if you travel to Japan. Nothing good happens after midnight. Don't do that.
Yeah, so, yeah. Good stuff does happen after midnight, let's be fair.
A lot of good stuff happens after midnight, but just, you know, be careful.
Yeah.
You know, use extra precaution. If you're out drinking with friends, if you're a tourist, you're out drinking with friends, you know, at midnight, maybe don't go to that extra bar. Go back to the hotel, drink at the hotel.
What I say as well is Japan, you know, in the UK, you'll go drinking, you know, if you go to like a bar or a nightclub, you know, you might not go out to 11. You go at 10, like, oh, it's early. Why are we going so early? So that's kind of normal drinking in the UK.
Yeah.
And then you get like a taxi home with your friends. But in Japan, people really live quite far apart. So if you're lucky, you might have a friend in like your neighborhood. But it's usually never the case. So depending on your train line, your last train might be like 11:50.
Yeah.
And then if you miss that, it's going to be like, you know, $300. To get a taxi home.
Or you have to wait 5 hours for the first train to run again.
Or you wait for the first train. And yeah, you know, it's not dangerous or anything, but it's just not nice, is it? So I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
Don't miss your last train.
I'll say this: I've had just to further elaborate. I've stayed overnight in places before.
Yeah.
Right. I think when you're young, it's kind of one of those things like, oh, I can do it one weekend or a month or something. It's never fun. It's never once for me been fun.
No.
And been worth it to do that. So catch your last train home. Make sure, even if you're a tourist, go home. Go back. Don't go to that extra bar. Even if you're having a lot of fun, it's not going to be worth it.
I swear to God, I always think, I'm the same. And it's fun. And it gets like 2 o'clock. I'm just tired now.
Yeah.
And, the atmosphere goes dead with like your group of friends. Like, oh, what place is open now? And
right.
I always think I wish I just went home.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So let's talk about food. So what's like a must-have food in Japan, in your opinion?
So, we're both English teachers. We both have taught many different Japanese students from many different backgrounds and economic classes. And they would always recommend sushi. So that feels like a cheap answer to just say sushi. It is a good answer. It's a very valid answer, right? If you come to Japan, if you're a tourist, you got to try the sushi.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Besides the obvious answer, I think things like okonomiyaki. Or manju-yaki. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, manju is it? Like that's the Tokyo one, isn't it?
Yeah. It for those who don't know, okonomiyaki is kind of like, it's like a batter. You fry it and you put like ingredients like bean sprouts and other vegetables and noodles, things like that.
I always call it Japanese pancake.
See, I think that's a lot of people say that. I think that's misleading because
it is misleading.
Yeah,
that's the best I can explain.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. It is batter, but something like that, because it's, especially if you're coming from like a Western culture, I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah, like that's my go-to rule. Is I'm sure a lot of like pretentious people and Japanese people will say, "Oh, sushi in Japan is the best ever." In America, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah,
the menu will be different, but sushi's sushi, in my opinion.
Right.
I've probably just become like personal grana in Japan now. But that's my opinion of it. So when my friends or relatives come to Japan, I want to take you to somewhere you cannot get whatsoever.
Right.
In your own country.
Right.
And that's going to be okonomiyaki. I think shabu shabu as well.
That's a good one.
It's like that's like hot pot, where it's basically like hot water, and sometimes there's like some flavor to it as well. And then you put in like meat, like pork. It's like really thin sliced, and you can put in vegetables if
you basically just dip the meat and it cooks like immediately as you dip it.
Yeah, it's so good. Like that, I'm a big fan of that one. I like is it sukiyaki?
Oh, sukiyaki. Yeah.
That's the one I like. And that one, you're getting like a raw egg and you kind of mix it in with like the meat.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of people, like, raw egg, you would die. Stop being a baby. It's really good. Like, you should definitely try it.
I don't know if it's entirely raw. Maybe. I always thought it was like, half soft boiled.
No, so I think the place I go to, like, they give you the egg on the side, and then you crack it into the bowl.
I see.
You give it a bit of a mix.
I see. Okay.
And then you dip the meat in and eat it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about now.
But I think because in Japan, people do eat raw eggs a lot in like their food. Like they might have, for example, rice and put a raw egg on top of the rice and so on. The standards for that in Japan is much higher. There's more testing for it.
Yeah.
So it's less likely you will become sick. Like I wouldn't recommend, in America, try that right away. Yeah, I don't know how it works there, so I wouldn't recommend that.
But, yeah, because, in the U.S., no one eats raw egg, right? Yeah. So they don't need to test for that because no one does it.
Except for Rocket. So don't say no one, okay?
That's true.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, though. I'm trying to think anything else that's kind of unique that you could, that you can eat and...
They have snacks are always kind of unique, right? Like
Sometimes, for the wrong reasons. But,
that's true.
Yeah.
Well, like certain chips in the UK, you would call them crisps.
Yeah.
That you get here, you probably will not find anywhere else.
Yeah.
So except for just like food, I would always recommend people try like the snacks or the kind of the different sweets in Japan, because those are probably even more unique than any kind of food that you could find. Food.
Yeah, interesting as well. Well, to me at least, is in the UK, chocolate is like we call milk chocolate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of milk to it, I think. So in Europe, they was like, this is not chocolate. We want to classify it as something different.
Right.
But so, the chocolate compared to that in Japan is quite bitter. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more cocoa-like content to it.
Oh, yeah.
And, if that's like your type of thing, you'll like it. I like chocolate in Japan as well. The crisps, for me, they're good. But I don't think they're the same type of quality for flavoring.
No.
And what I say there is, Western people definitely like stronger flavors compared to Japanese people.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So, that's just my own personal taste. Like, some people might like that. But yeah, for me, I like a lot of, flavor. I like eating like, Indian food, for example. So people, it's like, oh, salt is spicy. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah. No, pepper is spicy. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like unique things you could, if you come to Japan, there are plenty of things that you can eat.
Yeah.
Right. It's not all raw fish or fish-based stuff.
Yeah.
There's plenty of meats and chicken and veggies.
Yeah.
Although if you are vegetarian or vegan, it's going to be much harder for you.
Yeah, that really shocked me. Like, I thought being vegetarian in Japan would be easy.
It's not.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, when he came here, he's vegan, and, he's so knowledgeable about all that stuff.
Yep.
So stuff I wouldn't even think to check. He's like, yeah, so that. I was like, I don't know. And finding a place where we could eat was such a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it would be the opposite.
Yep.
But, I think even if you ask those types of questions, like in the UK at least, and probably in America as well, if you say, hey, does this have this content? They can tell you, oh, it does or it doesn't. And if they don't know, like, let me go ask.
Yep.
Here, people just generally won't know.
Yeah.
Like, veganism here doesn't seem like it's a thing.
It's not.
So
I know
that's a big challenge, yeah.
I did a research paper on it.
Wow.
Because I wanted to try it.
Yeah.
As an experiment.
Yeah.
So I went vegan for I was supposed to target 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I made it like maybe 5 days.
Right.
Yeah. And that fifth day was so difficult because I had eaten about as many rice balls as I had ever wanted to eat. Right.
Yeah.
And you go to any restaurant or supermarket, all the salads have egg or pork or cheese in it.
Or the dressings got something.
Something in it. Got milk or something in it. So it's a lot harder than people think it is.
I'll tell you right now, quick tip. If you ever come to Japan to live and you want to be conservative with your spending until you get a job and you're properly established, you can definitely survive on rice balls.
For a while.
Like, the first few months I came here, my lunch every day was literally 2 tuna rice balls and like a bottle of drink. Mm-hmm. And you save a lot of money that way.
Yeah, you can.
Okay,
one more thing
that
I don't... So in certain places, like in New York, right, they have bodegas and you can get food at the bodegas, or like if you go to where I'm from, Texas, you can go to the gas station and get food. Usually most of the time that food is not good.
Yeah.
Right, it's purposefully not good because it's supposed to be cheap.
Yeah.
But food at the convenience store in Japan is actually quite good.
Yeah, it's reasonable. Like a friend of mine, his family came to Japan and they loved Family Mart chicken.
Yeah.
And he's saying, hey, do you know the recipe for it? I'm like, the recipe? Like, yeah, if you ask them, they think the Italians, like, they wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
For one, the staff wouldn't know it, and like they're definitely not gonna tell me. Like, I can see if any of my friends know about it, but everyone's like, what? Why?
Yeah.
But yeah, they visited Japan and they loved the Family Mart chicken as, convenience store. Yeah.
It just that is another thing that surprised me because it wasn't, where I'm from in Texas, if you got, gas station food, even worse 7-Eleven food, it's horrible. It's horrible for you.
Prepare to be sick.
Yeah, right? But, in Japan, it's actually, it's good and a lot of people do it. So
yeah, it's reasonable quality. And, you can... America and UK is completely different in this way, but when you eat out in the UK, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Even getting a sandwich costs you, quite a bit. But in Japan, if you eat cheap food, it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be amazing.
It'll be edible. And you'll enjoy it.
You'll enjoy it, yeah. It's very rarely I eat something cheap and like, oh, that was disgusting. I threw, half of that out.
Yeah, right.
That's never happened in Japan, at least. Yeah. Here's an exciting question.
Okay.
What is a street beer? And this question's so exciting. On my notes, I actually did 3 question marks for that.
So Sean and I have known each other for a long time, and I'm sure this isn't unique to us at all.
No.
But it's pretty common in Japan. Public drinking is so common; everyone does it. So if you're from the U.S., you're not allowed to drink in public. You can't have an open container. Because a lot of times, right, you have to drive, so it's part of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were free in America.
Yeah. But in Japan, it's much more common, so a lot of people do it. So a lot of times after work, business people, including me and Sean, will go out to the convenience store, buy a beer, and just sit on the street and talk and drink for a while. Because it's cheaper than going to the bar, and it's very much accepted here.
I tell you as well, this is so, like, I can go to the bar with the same people, but every time I always think, like, the street beer is, like, so much more fun. I don't know why that is.
It's cheaper for one, and two, if you can find kind of, a secluded area, like we have our own area that we go to all the time. We can, be louder than usual. We don't have to worry about anything.
By we, he means me. But, even then, like, it is acceptable to drink in Japan. But, yeah, we still try to be reasonable. We try to get to a place that's, out of the way. So we're not standing in anyone's way, trying to get home. And
oh, don't get me wrong. Like, just if you go out with your friends and have a beer at the train station, like, people are going to look at you weird. But if you go out and kind of out of the way, or if you can find a somewhat secluded area, like, people don't care.
Yeah, you just don't want to bother people, really.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen people, literally, I'll be on my way to work, and then some guy sit next to me, and I hear, like...
Yep.
And I look like, what was that? And the guy's got, like, a tall can of beer, and just finishing it off, and I was like, dude, it's, like, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
But, even you're... Not that frequently, but you will see people drinking on the train, even. And if you take, like, the Shinkansen, the bullet train, if you take it like in the evening time, the train will start and it's like a chorus of like cans being opened.
Yeah.
It's just people like, time to drink now.
Especially in like certain, even on, I would say, like normal trains and certain cars, there's like the acceptable drinking cars and there's the unacceptable drinking cars.
Yeah. But you can think about that however you want. For me, as long as the alcohol doesn't stink, you get somewhere, that smells horrible, like a cheap whiskey or something, something gives you bad flashbacks. Then for me,
PTSD.
For me it's fine, and it's very rare that you'll get like a drunk guy on the train who's then bothering people. They just keep to themselves, and
a lot of times, occasionally you'll get the drunk guy, but usually there's something else wrong with them as well.
Yeah, it usually comes with mental illness, or
additional problems,
being homeless, or being a dick, really. But yeah, I think the street beer is very exciting, and
I think
it's the way to go.
Especially if you live here, if you are moving from a Western country and you're going to come here, it is maybe something you will do later.
Yeah.
It's probably something you want to do, especially because actually drinking in bars. If you go to a nightclub in the U.S., it's quite expensive. But if you go to a bar, it depends on where the bar is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in Japan what kind of bar it is. It's going to be expensive to go drinking there.
Something excited me when I came here, because, I worked in Shinjuku, and that was a great group of people, and they loved a party. So, it's your birthday, everyone in the office goes drinking.
Yeah.
We get like a bar, we rent like the space for a few hours. New Year's time, go drinking. After New Year's time, go drinking.
Yep.
Christmas party, go drinking. You're leaving the company, go drinking. You join the company, go drinking. So I used to go to like izakayas a lot, which, Japanese bars, and they tend to have this you can drink menu.
Yes.
And when I first got here, I was like, you can drink. I'm going to abuse this to the fullest.
Yeah.
And I tell you, this would never work in the UK.
Nor the US.
Because people just kind of abuse it as much as possible. Because that's what you do.
Yep.
But I'll say, have you ever had like a 3-hour like Nomi Hodai, all you can drink, and you leave and you're like, I'm not even drunk?
Yeah, it's happened before.
Yeah.
Especially like business occasions. Yeah.
So I always think it's good, it's fun, but you end up spending quite a bit of money because you get like, it'd be, for example, $30 for all you can drink. That's great, 2 hours, I can get wasted in that time. And then everyone gets food. Whether you're eating or not, you pay in for the food anyway.
Oh, yeah.
You end up spending $50, $60, and there's always a second party that's going to be at a bar, then you pay like $8, $9, per drink.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, you spent 7,000 yen, and you're like running for the last train home.
Yeah.
So like, it's good, but it's not as good as what I first thought it was. And the staff starts slowing down. Like, you guys are really drinking us out of business here. Like, slow down. And the beers are definitely watered down. I might be sued for saying that. But if I drink 7 of your beers and I go home sober, you fucked up.
Yeah. I think that was another thing that really actually shocked me when I first learned about it, was the Nomi Hodai, all you can drink.
Yeah.
And just, how it wouldn't work in another country. But you are right. You in your mind, you go to a Nomi Hodai and think like, I can drink this many beers in this much time, and I'll definitely get my money's worth. Well, about that second hour, they're only getting you 1 or 2 beers, 1 or 2 drinks. That's it. You're not getting, and even if you call them many times, they'll be as slow as possible.
Yeah, like your first 20 minutes there, drinks are coming. Like you put the order in, 1 or 2 minutes they've came. Like, this service is on like this is peak service here, on point. Once you get past 5, they're like, we need to slow these guys down. Like they've got their money's worth already.
Yeah.
And then you'll be ordering drinks and like, please wait a minute. And like, okay. And you'll see them 20 minutes later. I was like, please, like, I'm over here. They're like, yeah, okay. And then they disappear for 10 minutes and bring you a drink. Like, it wasn't like this at the beginning.
Right.
It's like relationships, really.
Yeah, a little bit.
Everyone tries hard in the beginning, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought like it's pretty exciting on paper, but
in practice, not so
now
much.
that I've been here for a few years, if you think, all you can drink, that's really cheap. The cheap way to go is the street beer for sure.
For sure.
And that's all I've got to say about that. They get swindled, man. I had one guy, he loved going to this, I'm not going to name the place, but this Indian restaurant, and they do like Nomi Hodai. It's like all you can eat, all you can drink. So like, that's cool. I love Indian food.
Yeah.
And then you'll be on like a table of 4, and they bring like the dishes. So you think it's all you can eat? No, they just bring like a set menu that you share with the 4 of you. Like, okay, it's not really all you can eat.
Right.
And then you'll be trying to order drinks. And then, I'm not even over-exaggerating this to like make it funnier or worse. But we're trying to get drinks, and the guy's like, wait a minute, like, we're busy. Like, then why do you take this booking if you're busy?
Right.
Get more stuff. And then he'll come back, and then he's so slow, literally 10 minutes between every drink for each person. Eventually he said, let's just get like a bottle of wine and just drink that. Like, okay. So we get him, 10 minutes later he comes back. Can we get like a bottle of wine? He's like, okay. This motherfucker, right? You can tell this is years back, I'm still annoyed by this. The guy comes back with the bottle, no fucking glass.
10 more
for real.
10 more minutes to go get the glasses.
So we put a hand up. 10 minutes later, comes back. Hey, can we get like a glass? Oh yeah. Poor attitude all the way. By the way, the guy fucks off again. Comes back. One glass. One glass this guy brings. So we can't, no, you know, Japan's super polite. No one wants to start before anyone.
Right.
So I'm happy to pour my glass and you guys manage.
Right. You guys can figure it out.
So we get the guy back again. We're like, yeah, can we get like 3 more glasses? Okay. The guy comes back 10 minutes later. It literally took half an hour or so to get 1 bottle of wine with the glasses.
Yep. Yeah, but it happens.
I went to fight him. I said, is this your friend? Because my friend loved going there because he knew the owner. I said, oh, my owner's my friend. I was like, is that guy your friend? Because I want to drag him outside and beat him up. He's like, yeah, you do what you want. I wanted to kill him. Just his whole attitude as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is a bit vague. Maybe nothing comes to mind right away. But what do you think is your best and worst experience during your time in Japan?
That's a really good question. Best experience is so I've mentioned before I'm married, and this is gonna sound very, very soft and cringy, but
worst experience is being married.
No.
Man,
my best experience is taking a shot with a girl I considered way out of my league at a bar, and I ended up marrying her. But that was probably the best experience. I know it's pretty cringy.
You know she's listening to this now, right? Like that's why he said that. If she wasn't going to listen to it, she's like, oh, you do a podcast? I want to listen to the podcast. He's like, oh, okay. Better say something nice now.
Worst experience.
He actually asked me to ask this question for him, like I set him up.
I did not. Worst experience. I've never really had like a truly bad experience.
Yeah.
The worst one I can think of is probably Halloween in Shibuya, and just how the first time we went, we were so unprepared. So for anyone who doesn't know, Halloween in Tokyo is a huge thing, and it's not necessarily to celebrate. It's just a reason for people to go out drinking.
Yeah,
everyone to dress up slutty, and
Japanese people are very much like British people in this manner, in that they love an excuse to go drinking.
Yeah.
Like cherry blossom.
Go drinking.
In England, cherry blossom's like, oh, that looks nice. In Japan, like, that's going drinking.
Yeah.
That's going drinking.
Yeah.
And I was saying in Shinjuku specifically, where I worked before, every excuse was like, we go drinking. Like, oh, we just broke a new record. We go drinking. I was like, oh, company's paying? No, but we go drinking.
Yeah.
And, I didn't argue with that. So, any excuse to go drinking. And, cosplay, which is dressing up, in
a costume.
In costumes anyway. It's usually like anime characters or movie characters. That is huge in Japan.
In certain areas,
and
for
it
sure.
always has been.
Yep.
So I think the idea of Halloween has gotten bigger year on year since I've been here. But yeah, the excuse to go drinking and also to dress up in cosplay. Because cosplay as well, it's like, if you do cosplay, you're like a weirdo.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, what do you call, like otaku.
Yeah.
Is like, you're like a nerd.
A super nerd.
So, it's not really like a cool thing, but Halloween, yeah, it becomes acceptable, right?
Yep. So, Halloween in Japan it's not really a thing except outside of or inside of Tokyo, and especially Shibuya.
Yeah.
So, the year that I went 2 years in a row. Both time I considered it a mistake. But about a little over a million people, and Shibuya is a district in Tokyo, and it's not very big actually. It's quite small.
It is small, yeah, but it's always round.
It's always crazy. It's always crazy. But you would probably stick 1 million people in, I don't know how big of an area actually, but it's very, very small, and it is insane.
Yeah.
And the first experience, for about 2 hours, I had fun. And then after that 2 hours, it was a nightmare. Because anytime you try to go somewhere, you have to manage an ocean of people. If you want to drink, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. Buy your beer before you go, I'll say that.
Because usually they buy it from like the local convenience store, and then they're sold out.
They're completely sold out.
Yeah.
When the first year we went, we tried to get into 2 or 3 bars and nightclubs, and it was always like a 2-hour wait to get into one. And so we just decided to go to the convenience store. Of course, every single convenience store. And we went to like 6 or 7 of them
Yeah.
completely sold out. So we had to walk 2 districts down to like Shinjuku or something like that to buy alcohol.
Yeah.
And so it was a 30-minute walk there and then another 30-minute walk back. It was
Alcoholics do that.
Yeah. It was horrible. And I am glad I did it as an experience, but I also regret it at the same time.
I think as well, like something a bit off topic, but Japan doesn't do anticipating supply and demand very well.
No.
So like quite recently they had like the Rugby World Cup here, and it was a fantastic success. My country lost in the finals, which was sad. But big success. But they were so worried about running out of alcohol.
Yes.
Because even though they applied to have this and they organised it for like years, at the last few months they realised, rugby fans like drinking.
Yep.
I was like, you didn't know that. So, these Halloween nights, like, you're going to be sold out. You like money. Order extra.
Yeah.
You're going to sell it at some point anyway. So I never really got that whole, we've sold out.
We've sold out alcohol on probably the biggest drinking event of the year.
Here's another good question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it. I don't know if I could. What do you think you can take from your time in Japan that's going to help you going forward into the future, back in America? And
I do have an answer for this, and I think it's a relatively good answer, and you might even have a similar experience as I do.
Go on, pat yourself on the back a bit more, you fuck.
Before I moved to the US, I was actually kind of an introverted person. I was shy as a kid. I didn't really have a whole lot of self-confidence
and friends
and friends. But I never really wanted to experience new things.
Yeah.
Moving to Japan, I couldn't just sit at home every day, every night, because I wouldn't make friends and I would hate myself.
Yeah.
It forced me, It forced me to actually go out and talk to people, because if you go to Japan and you don't try to talk to someone else, they're definitely not talking to you.
Yeah, that's true.
So it forces you to kind of be more, not even necessarily confident, just outgoing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you become more confident over time, and I think it's definitely changed my personality for the better.
That's
being
interesting.
Here.
It's kind of funny you saying like people come over and talk to you, like and then I'm thinking, where they will, but it's usually the people you don't want to.
Yes.
It's always someone like weird, or
it's some 60-year-old businessman who just wants to like speak English for 5 minutes,
or some weird guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Like, I actually did think about this question, and I've been thinking about it, and I was like, well, how's it improved my work ethic? And I was like, maybe, but something that's kind of a misconception that you hear a lot is like, you get, even Americans, I've heard this, would say, Americans are so lazy. Japanese people work hard. They're like, not really.
Yeah.
And I would say they work long hours, but
they don't actually work.
In terms of efficiency, it's really poor, actually.
Right.
And, don't take my word for it. Like, that's in the economic numbers. You look like automation, for example. The UK is poor at this as well compared to, like, Germany, for example. But, yeah, work efficiency is really poor, but they work long hours. It's not necessarily working hard. It's just working longer.
Yeah.
And in terms of even working hours, like, many countries work much more, like Mexico, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Their hours is unbelievable.
Well, here's the thing. Like, for example, in the US, it's... and I don't know what the exact percentage of it is, but I definitely know that, like, flex time is much more common.
Yeah.
Right? So, you come in, once you get your work done, you're done.
Yeah.
And that's not everywhere. Of course, that's not everywhere.
Yeah, but it's more prevalent,
It's more prevalent.
In Sweden, that's massive, I've heard.
Yeah.
And, like, you look at childcare around the world in terms of men who do any form of childcare. So childcare is basically looking after your own children.
Yeah, right.
In Sweden, I think the average is 4 hours per day.
See, that makes sense to me.
In the UK, I think it was 2.5 at a time. This is a few years ago now.
Mm.
I was like, okay, that's still pretty good. In Japan, it was half an hour.
Oh, yeah. I could 100% see that. But, so, like, for example, if I have a list of work I have to do, I have to get finished, maybe I can finish it in 5 hours.
Yeah.
Right. So in like a pretty progressive American company, I can finish that 5 hours and go home because I've already finished what I had to do that day.
Yeah.
In Japan, they have to be there.
Yeah.
You can't. Doesn't matter if you finish your work in that first 5 hours, then you have to wait, and they'll just sit there. And a lot of times, a lot of these. I'm going to say this, and I hope people who don't quite understand won't take this the wrong way, but a lot of black companies, and that doesn't mean like skin color. I'm talking that it's a stigma in Japan for a negative company. A lot of these black companies, like they'll just sit you in a corner once you finish, and you just have to sit there. You can't get on the computer. You can't do anything. You just sit there and stare at a wall until you finish your shift.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And, I'll say this as well, like, we complain about it, but, our experience as well, for sure, is we definitely get more leniency from companies than actual Japanese people do.
Oh, for sure.
When you talk about black companies and being treated horribly, Japanese staff get treated, not every company, but even the average company compared to, like, progressive Western companies, it's horrible.
It's
like maintenance leave is not a thing. There's women who left their job and then they kind of get forced out of the company.
Yeah.
Because the boss is like, yeah, we don't need you around here. Like, you're not working or whatever.
Right.
And you hear the horror stories, and I think that's one good thing about, working in the UK is even the labour laws tend to favour the employees because it's labour law. Here, the labour laws are to protect companies. It's really different.
For sure. Protect the company or the customer.
I mean, again, being fair, it's not like I've had like horrible work experiences here. I know that we do get treated much better than the local staff, even the people we work with directly.
In our company, we get treated much better than the Japanese native staff, for sure.
Not like current company, I'm just saying as a general experience, but
I might even say current company, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as the previous one.
That's true.
But it's one of those things where it kind of depends on like your office, like where you're at.
Yeah.
And who your manager is, like.
That's true.
This was years
true.
back now, but I heard like it was like a male manager, and when he talked to the female Japanese staff, he used to talk to him like shit. I'm like, there's no need for that. And he just really demeaning things like, hey, when I talk to you, you write it down.
Yep.
And the stuff like, okay, like with a pen. And I was like, I'm thinking, did I just hear that? Like, is my Japanese understanding? Maybe I've got it wrong.
Right.
He's after me like, did he just fucking say that?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. I was like, tell him the fuck off.
Yeah.
And then when he'd come to like me or the other staff, he's like, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you could do this. Like, please, I'd buy you like a milkshake. You know who you are if you're listening, you fuck. And I used to abuse him.
Yeah.
Like, what I did was probably considered bullying. And I'm not ashamed of that, because how he treated the other staff, he made them hate coming to work. That's horrible.
That is horrible.
And the stuff he used to, like, he'd cuss them out in front of everyone for stuff he used to do. I was like, yeah, I've got no respect for you. I'm not going to go easy on you.
So I don't want to scare anyone off
from
coming to Japan or trying this industry that we're in, which is the Eikawa industry. But understand that it's not what you expect it to be. It is not the license to experience Japan that you might like. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm going to move to Japan. I'm going to teach, and that way it'll allow me to explore Japan and pay for my room." That's not what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult industry to not burn out in.
Yeah.
You get so much burnout so quickly among employees.
Yeah. And even the general work, like when things go well, you do give a lot of your energy to other people.
Yeah.
What I will say is it's a really fantastic insight to Japanese people.
That's true.
Like, Japanese people will talk to us more frankly and honestly than they'd ever do in their own language.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big release for a lot of them. And they type some stuff like, oh, did you just say that?
Yep.
And that's very interesting. Like, I often feel like I know Japanese people more than Japanese people.
Yeah, I would. I could definitely say that. I know this Japanese person better than maybe some of their family members do.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting insight. It's an opportunity. And I think for teaching as well, if you have that personality, like I like people, I like helping people, so I don't know how much I help them. They might say, Sean, you don't help me at all.
Right.
You're stealing a salary. But that's something I personally like, so I find the job easier. And what I say as well is if you are looking to come to Japan or other parts in Asia and get into that industry, I'd say at least 80% of the job is personality.
That's true.
If you can adapt yourself to other people, and if you can be likable, you're going to do well. And then the rest of the technicalities of English, you can kind of learn as you go along, or do some, I did a lot of research in terms of grammar, because, people said, my friends would say, oh, in English, you say this or this.
Yeah.
Oh, we say that one. Why?
Yep.
Why? Because we do.
Yeah.
Like for the life of me, I couldn't have explained it to you.
And that's not a good answer.
I always say, I really believe this, Japanese people know English grammar more than English people.
Oh, for sure. I would agree with that, yeah.
Like, their knowledge of it is really class. Like, they say, is this past present? I'm like, present and the past at the same time. Well, naturally, I would say this. Like, I used to say stuff like that. Well, now I'm like, yeah, it is. Or no, if you want to be like this, you say it like this. But yeah, that was a big challenge. Okay, so kind of switch up a little bit. We'll kind of get into the saucy stuff now, maybe. This might be me being cancelled in the first podcast. So we talked a little bit before. You're returning to America.
Yeah.
Why now? 7 years, Glenn.
Yeah.
You turn your back on me.
I about 3 or 4 years in, I would even say 2 years in, I was just burnt out on our industry.
Yeah.
I didn't see any progression in pay or position.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the skills necessary to branch into the growing industries like IT, which I could have possibly if I had tried early enough. I could have.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
What I say as well, though, is particularly in America, UK also, IT pay here is really poor.
Comparatively, for sure.
Like, for the skill required and the job you do.
Yeah.
If you're Japanese, listen to this. If your English is half decent, and you're in the IT industry, you've got skills and qualifications that can, allow you to work in America or somewhere in Europe, go now, don't look back.
Yeah.
Like,
I would
you
agree
can
with
make so much more money,
Yep.
and you'll be so much more appreciated, I would say.
For sure. So just trying to, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I do have a master's degree, and it's in education.
Thinks he's better than me now, don't I?
So my end goal was to try and be a university professor.
Yeah,
but the more research I did on being an English university professor, especially inside of Tokyo, it's extremely difficult.
Very, very difficult. And it's the same kind of questions you get where I've talked to people who've done that, and they say, yeah, in 5 years, if you work at in Japan, if you work in the same company for 5 years, there's a law that they must offer you a permanent contract.
Yep.
Which in university is like a tenure position.
Yep.
They're not going to do that.
No.
So what they usually do is when it gets close to that time, they just won't renew your contract, and they don't have to tell you why. It'll be like, oh, it's budget reason.
Yeah, they just won't do it.
They just won't do it. So, imagine you're trying to build like a career for yourself, and every few years you've got to change, your job. Like, imagine if you got in at Harvard, for example. That's the highest you can go.
Right.
4 years later, you have to go lower
Yep.
now. So that's tough, yeah.
So, and that's not everywhere in Japan. There are people who work in maybe like a more like rural area or a slightly bigger city who do get tenure, and that does happen. But your Japanese has to be almost fluent, right? And you have to meet a certain criteria to do that, which I just don't meet at this moment. And so I felt stuck, and I just thought, I got to go back.
Yeah.
I got to recharge my battery somehow.
a friend of mine, he went back just before the merger of our companies and whatever.
Yeah.
And he was talking about it, and I gave him what I think is wonderful advice. And I said, the longer you stay here, the more difficult it is to go back,
yes.
I think.
I would agree with
like,
that.
yeah, I'm going.
Yep.
And he's, doing pretty fantastic back home and that.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, that's like, I always think I'd like to go back to England, but once you have kids, you're stuck.
Yeah. See, that's we don't have kids yet, so it's much easier for us.
Yeah.
Than it would be for you.
Warning here, a warning. I think the second you do, that conversation will start. Hey, so going back to Japan?
I could definitely see that happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But hopefully by that time as well, you're finished whatever you want to do in like the near future.
Yeah.
And then coming back to Japan will be a different, how would you say that? A different opportunity or a different
experience maybe?
Yeah, a different experience. The things you're saying that you can't really do now, maybe by that time you can.
Yeah, have more avenues, hopefully.
There, yeah. You can get me a job as a janitor.
Yeah.
I clean the it's going to be a blackboard, isn't it? Because they haven't put any modern stuff in. Okay. Here's a tough question. The riots, the looting, the election. I don't know why I'm laughing, because I'm British. My country's fucked me with that Boris twat.
Yeah.
But what do you expect to face back in America, for all that? What I've seen it, and, Europeans, we love a bit of, I'm kind of messed up, Schadenfreude, basically laughing at America, pointing at things like, look how stupid they are.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so funny.
Yeah.
And in recent history, I've not been able to do that because my country's made pretty terrible decisions as well. But, with what went on recently, I didn't want to laugh. I just looked at this is sad.
Yeah.
It's just sad. Like, it's not fun for me to laugh at, and
because there's a lot of human suffering underneath that.
So much. And you just don't see any daylight to the situation.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, so I have two separate perspectives of that. I am from Texas. I'm from Houston. I will move back to Houston when I move back to the U.S. And it's in a different situation because Texas is actually pretty good. Now, Austin has gotten a little bit crazy, according to some people. But, it's Austin. But when I go back, that's not something I necessarily have to worry about because that doesn't necessarily affect my area.
Yeah.
But I look at it also as an American, and it's tragic. Yeah. And it's... I don't know how it gets better.
Yeah. I've literally no idea.
I hope and I assume that it will at some point. But when or how, no idea.
I think, one side thinks the other is evil.
Well, yeah.
And the other side thinks that they are stupid. So there's no middle ground to even start a conversation. Not as a general thing, but, for the people who are like the biggest true believers of that. I don't see how do you start that conversation.
It's difficult because there are people who have experienced this over the course of many generations, right? Police brutality did not just happen overnight, nor did it just happen like recently in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So you get a group of people who have these shared experience over multiple generations. How do you get over that?
Yeah.
Honestly, like no matter what happens, even if you do defund the police, does that make it better? Does that erase everything that's happened? Like, there's no way.
Well, I think the thing as well is the communities that are mostly affected by, crime. It's kind of go state by state, but, for me, outside looking in, it seems like the communities like Southside Chicago, for example, do they need less police?
Yeah.
And I get the idea, like, it's not defunded police and, like, defund them. They have no money. They're finished.
Yeah.
I get that's not what people are saying. The sensible people.
Yeah.
They're saying spend the resource on something different that might provide better results.
Yeah.
Social work, for example.
Social workers.
I get that.
Yeah. Specialists, things like that.
But yeah, I just never really got that idea of like, I don't think the police are evil. But what I say is,
you know what's interesting, really, really quick, and this is, and I know a lot of people in the police force, and I'm not saying that these people are inherently bad, nor did they choose this position because they had something wrong with them. But it is interesting that, and I don't know how much of this is scientific fact.
Yeah.
But I have seen statistics before that, a majority of, sociopaths choose to be a CEO.
Yeah. I've read that a lot. Yeah.
Right.
Presidents.
Not just
presidents. Leaders in general.
Oh yeah.
Have always shown that kind of.
What's also in like the top 5 is police. And okay, so there is a inclination for a person with sociopathic tendencies to choose one of these career paths, and one of them is the police force.
Yeah.
Now, how many of that is also mixed with racists and mixed with people who may have had bad experiences growing up, who then have a kind of power complex,
like that opportunity for revenge,
right?
In a way.
So I don't, and the thing is normally I wouldn't have an issue with that, except when you're the police. You have such an authority over other people that it exacerbates whatever problems you would present in other situations.
Yeah, 100%. And like what I say as well is when we make a mistake at work, it's a mistake, it's not good, but you go home.
Right. Everyone goes home.
When you make a mistake, someone's pulling out their keys to go into the house, a smartphone, and like, he's got a gun, you shoot the guy. One guy pulls the first, pulls the trigger first, and then the next guy pops 8 into him. You're like, 8 in the back, that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Then, for me, that's like, it could be a mistake, but the mistake, the repercussions of that are so, horrible. And, for me as well, it always looks like kind of bad training.
Yeah.
Like you'll see examples of like Swedish police, for example, or British police I've seen where British police are not armed. We have armed response and they usually get called in. But in general, police are not armed in the UK. But neither is the populace, so it's a different job completely. I understand that. But you'll see videos of a guy with a knife and he's, swinging it around and the police are managing him. And at the right moment, someone gets in, they tuck him to the ground, he gets disarmed, and it's, some guy with mental illness.
Yeah.
In America, you don't really see that type of police in. I think he's got a knife and he gets, 5 in the chest and that's the end of it.
There are plenty of examples that you can find on the internet of good police work where a police officer is clearly threatened with a weapon and they take all the necessary steps to disarm that person without taking their life. There are plenty of examples of that. But what I'm saying is that the police is a type of organization that we cannot allow any kind of manifestation of bad practice.
Yeah.
It cannot be allowed because of their situation.
Yeah.
Right? They are in such a position of authority over other people and over other people's lives that as impossible as it is to be perfect, you have to aim for that.
I think with this topic now, I can clickbait the audience and say heated argument. That's like a thing, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a tough job. Like, I don't want to be in their shoes. I say that right now.
Right.
But I definitely, defund them. I think because America is such a huge country, Europeans don't understand that. I don't understand it. Like you'll get Europeans like, yeah, I'm gonna go to like New York to Miami. Oh, you're gonna fly there? When you fly, I'm gonna rent a car and drive. Like, That's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
We don't understand how big the country is, and America's so culturally diverse, state to state. So you'll get places that do policing very well, and they're very well funded, very well trained. It's not like that across the country. So, for me, I think they need more training, and they need to be more selective about who they do hire. Like, it's not a job for everyone.
No.
Could I do it? In America, I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't think I've been brought up in that atmosphere, so I would say no. Would I want to do it? No. And this is before this bad press with police. It's a tough job.
It is a tough job. And it's not even like the hiring pool. Like, we only need to hire a certain type of person. It's the, if you're in the police force for 10 years, I don't know. I've never been in there. And the police officers that I know, I'm not necessarily close to. But how does that affect your mental state?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you've been in the police force, especially if you're in an area like Chicago where there's such a high crime rate, like that's got to mess you up.
You're literally in a war zone.
In some places, yeah.
Service people who go to Afghanistan or Iraq, in the past, you go there and you go stateside, you have that kind of downtime, and then you go back and you do tours.
Yeah.
Police are doing it every day.
Yeah.
10 years, 20 years, where it is, right?
And
it's tough.
It is tough. And the whole defund the police thing, I like the theory of it. I like the idea. I don't know, and this is the thing, right? The theory is different from the practice.
Yeah.
Right. So how does it translate into practice? And obviously, we can't not have a police force. That's not an option.
Yeah.
So what do we do? And some states can implement it differently. And every city, a lot of different cities, especially the more liberal cities, are trying to experiment with this. Yeah. But it's a difficult topic.
Yeah, it's horrible. And, I think you see a lot of situations. I think there's a lot of agendas going on. And the media definitely has a role. Like, I've seen ones where I've read the headline. I was like, that's disgusting, really. And I've watched, they've got like a clip. I go on YouTube. Like, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
That's not what happened at all.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, you get the headline, and then months later, the report comes out. And the report shows, that was actually a good shooting, what police would consider a good shooting. The guy had a weapon in his hand, whatever. But the report would be like, innocent man shot in the back.
Right.
That's not how it happened.
Yeah.
The body camera shows that.
Right. Well, that's another thing. Is
no one's reading the report months later. The tension in community is always up. It's already up. The riots have happened, and
because a lot of, and I'll include myself in this. I've had such personally bad experiences with the police force over the years, and I lived in a fairly safe area with a majority of the same color skin. So all the police were the same color skin as all the residents.
Yeah.
Right. And I still had extremely bad experiences with the police, and I prejudge them. I do. I honestly do. I have a bias against the police. So I don't.
Me too. But that's just because they're looking at my friends and family.
Yeah.
See you soon. I miss you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's move on from that, because that's like something we could literally do 3 hours on and go back and forth on. And
what are we running on now?
We're
2 hours?
Close. It's like 1 hour 43 minutes.
Okay.
Like, it got to 4 there. I was like, 4 there?
Yeah.
I like 4. Here's a good question. And this could also be a deep topic. What misconceptions do you think your wife or Japanese people in general had about America? I've definitely had big ones.
The easiest one is that everywhere has guns. And that is by far the biggest and most common one, and it's the easiest answer. Because, of course, not everywhere does have guns. A lot of cities have banned guns.
Yeah.
So the other one... the other one I've heard that was by far the funniest is that we eat hamburgers every day.
I mean, what's wrong with that, though?
Right.
First of all,
First
of all, I would like to do that.
I would love to be able to do that. and that's more of because a lot of Japanese people who do eat rice every day, they eat rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with whatever else they eat.
Yeah.
So they get this idea that Japanese people eat rice for every meal every day, so Americans must eat hamburgers every day. So that was by far the funniest one I've heard.
Oh, I've seen Jerry Springer. That's probably true for the most part.
For some people it might be.
Don't even mention anything about British TV because we're not that slim ourselves.
No.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Like every American I've worked with, and I felt close enough to ask this question, like, oh, in America, you have a gun? You have a gun?
Yeah.
Because I have a fucking gun, I'll tell you right now. But I'm the guy who probably shouldn't have one.
Yeah.
I say to myself, like, God would never give me superpowers because I do horrible stuff. That guy cut in front of me in the line, you get electric shocked right now. But I was definitely aware of the different state laws and whatever. But literally every American I've asked that question, 100% all said no.
And I think the people who generally do have a gun
Probably don't
aren't the people who are traveling abroad.
Yeah.
I'll say that. In general.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love a gun.
Yeah.
I don't have one right now. Don't raid me. But I'd love to have one. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And let's see. So we talked a bit about advice for people coming to Japan. What if someone was going to America? What advice would you give them about settling down and so forth, and things that would be good to know about?
Research your area.
Yeah.
Wherever you're going to go, and it doesn't. It's a little bit different than if you're moving to Japan. You don't necessarily have to research your area because everything is kind of so similar.
Yeah.
But in the U.S., it is so different. Each community is different. Each city is different. Each state is different. So if you have a job and your job says, hey, we want you to move here, or if you're like, hey, you know what, I would like to go to the U.S. at some point.
Yeah.
Definitely do some research on the area that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
What are some of the laws there? What kind of jobs are usually there?
Yeah.
What's the housing market like?
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is kind of essential because your individual community, you can learn a lot about that, but that community is not anywhere representative of the broader state or the broader nation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something I've definitely learned about America in more recent years is just how diverse each state and even each city is.
Yep.
And what they believe in, how they live their lives, the food culture. It's really interesting for me.
Right. But for example, let's say, I'm from the US and I want to move to Liverpool.
Yeah.
Right? Liverpool is not reflective of, Brighton or Manchester. It's a very different thing.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you right now, if you ever go to Liverpool, watch your tyres like this, feel it. Yeah, I fucking said it.
But that's what I mean is if you move somewhere in the UK, like each area is so different from the other that you kind of have to research that specific area and find out the uniqueness if you can for each area.
I mean, you even look at like recent politics of like Brexit, for example. That was as close as it could get. I think it was like 51% and 49%.
Yeah.
And then you see, for example, huge metropolitan areas like Manchester, Liverpool, London, Glasgow and Scotland was very much wanting to stay in Europe, and the rest of the country didn't. And even if you look at like Scotland, for example, it's very left-leaning politics. Mm-hmm. A lot of social programs. They just made period products free in the country. Like
oh, really? Like women's products?
Yeah, it's very niche. But it's like it's not like you can go and get like the best product on the shelf and you don't need to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's more the kind of supply it. I heard the products are not the best of the best, but it's on offer. Fair play.
Right.
Education there is completely free.
Yeah.
So a lot of left-leaning politics, but the current government in for the UK is right-wing government. It's very different from America. That's something I learned. Is your like right-wing and left-wing compared to the UK is not even the same. Like our right-wing politics is like central politics in America.
That's true. That's
it's very interesting for me.
I would definitely agree with that to an extent. Yeah,
and I think especially in the last 5 years, even not even 10, in America, that's gone definitely more. To each side.
The extreme left has gotten more extreme. The extreme right has gotten more extreme.
It's pretty
for
crazy,
sure. For sure.
Then let's leave it with one more question for today. We talked a little bit before about what kind of character comes to Japan.
Yeah.
So just for my fun, let's talk about
that. So obviously we are including ourselves in this. We are probably weirder than what you would consider the stereotype of our countries. But you get a lot of weird people here, man. A lot of characters, and it's not always good.
Yeah.
I think part of that is a survival instinct. I think you have to be a bit bizarre or weird to come here and live.
I think just having to decide to come here, there's got to be something like a little bit quirky about you.
Right. And I would say that even as strange as we are, and again, this is of course bias. We are the most normal people that I know.
Yeah.
So it's a thing, man. And I don't. That's one of the reasons for people who want to move to Japan. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because the people who come here are not what you think. Usually,
I would say particularly for Americans in this regard, but I think Japan is a very isolating country.
It is.
It's very difficult to make friends outside of
True.
work. And, Americans are used to, maybe not in like San Diego, I've heard, but, Americans have like their big houses and warm communities.
Yeah.
That's not Japan, especially Tokyo. So a lot of people end up where you're in, they have this impression, I'm come to Japan, everyone's kind of love me, I'm going to make all these friends, I'm going to get this anime girlfriend, this waifu. And then what actually ends up happening, at least for the first few months you're here, is
you spend a lot of time alone.
No one wants to be your friend.
Right.
You're going to spend time alone, and your apartment is going to be the same size as the bedroom you're sitting in now.
Yep. Essentially.
And, for a lot of people, that's tough to deal with. Mm-hmm. Me coming here was completely different because I had so many friends from university. It's one of the reasons why I come here, because it's new, but it's comfortable. I'd been here sightseeing before.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was a bit familiar. I didn't feel like I knew everything, but I was familiar.
Yeah.
And I definitely had friends here that I could hang out with and kind of rely on a little bit if needs be. But if you come here fresh off the boat, the first few months are going to be tough.
And here's the thing: is the weeaboo people, these people who are obsessed with Japan and Japanese culture and glorify it.
Yeah.
They're not the people who stay here. That's not the people you meet who live here, right? I've never met a foreign otaku who's lived in Japan. Have you?
No, that's a really good point. I never thought about that. But when you meet guys who are like, here, I've been here 10 years, 20 years, it's never that guy, actually.
It's never.
Yeah.
Because those people, those type of people can't survive here.
Yeah.
But the people who have been here, I've been here 7 years, you've been here 10 years, the people that we know who have been here for 20 years, they're just weird people, and they would be weird people in their own country.
What do I say, to kind of, saying we are weird.
Of course.
And I think it's in a good way. But the way I kind of separate the weirdness is I think in our home countries we had friends.
We were able to leave beneficial lives.
Yeah.
To a large extent.
Yeah. If we never left the country, we'd be doing fine.
Yeah.
We still have the same friends. You'd be doing well in your careers and work, probably distinctly middle class careers, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So coming here wasn't like a great opportunity to have a better life. The life would be very similar, is what I would say.
That's true.
But for the more weirder people, I would say they probably didn't have many friends back in America.
I think this is even more prevalent in our new organization. And we won't name names.
Yeah.
But
maybe
we will.
Yeah.
But how many people have we run into in this new organization that we've thought, the reason you came here was to escape your and I don't want to be too harsh, but your loser lifestyle.
Yeah.
In your home country.
Yeah.
Where you might be considered cool or fashionable here.
Yeah. I think that's 100% it. And those people, they tend to love their lifestyle. And something I kind of thought about earlier, I wanted to touch upon as well, is this is also very, very different between men and women. Women don't tend to stay in Japan very long.
That's true.
This is not a society for women.
That's true. I'll say that 100% true.
If you're like, I've met two middle-class white women from North America, and they had that whole like social justice thing going on, and feminism. And like, Japan is not the country for you.
No.
I'll just say that right now. Like, you think you're being oppressed in America? Shut the fuck up. Like, you try going to Saudi Arabia, don't even go that extreme. Just come to Japan.
Yeah.
And try and have a relationship with a Japanese guy.
It's not happening.
Not all of them.
For the most part, it's not happening.
But like, that whole sharing of duties, like cooking and cleaning, forget that nonsense. Like, you're there to serve the family.
If you're the wife, you are doing all the homework. It doesn't matter if your job makes more money than his. You're still expected to cook, clean, take care of the kids.
So I think Western women tend to not really thrive here in terms of like a social life and dating life. It's tough for them.
I would say for dating life, your initial options seem a lot larger. If you're for women,
really,
I think so, because there is a glorification among Japanese men of like, oh, I want a Western woman.
Well, yeah, I think in terms of quantity,
that's what I mean. Your initial options
in quality, like, are they the guys that you want to be dating?
That's true. But see, you have a much larger base of initial options. But the longer you stay, the longer you will decide like, this isn't really for me, or none of these people really match my ideal.
And I'll tell you right now, if this has nothing to do with racism, everyone's got their type.
Yeah.
Some people like tall women, some people like short women, some people like white women, black women. Everyone's got their type.
Yep.
And that's fine for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to force you to date someone you don't want to. If Japanese guys are not your type, but you want to date in Japan, you'll kind of struggle.
Yeah, struggle badly.
Because you'll get, not everyone, like, other Western people will date you, but most of them are here to date Asian women.
Uh-huh.
They're not, you're going to be treated like a Buddha, basically. Like,
you're a friend.
Friend zone, forget that. Like when you watch those American movies, and there's a girl who's actually good looking, but everyone sees her as like, oh, she's my friend. She's like a sister. I would never. Yeah. That's how you're going to be treated if your group, your group of male friends really.
That's a good question. Have you dated another foreigner here?
No,
I have, and it didn't really work out simply because when you are a foreigner here and you're in your foreigner group circle, it's kind of taboo to date in that circle.
Yeah.
Right? You don't do that because it ruins the environment around that circle. Of that circle, because that circle is supposed to be kind of like a safe zone. That's where you go to complain about things. So it's not necessarily. I mean, I have to imagine if you are a relatively attractive foreign woman and you come here, of course there will be options for you. There's options for you anywhere.
Of course,
But it's that group circle that you're going to make is not going to be those people won't necessarily desire you.
I'll tell you this as well, if you're like a very good looking woman from a Western country, the group you're in, you might not find a guy
that's true
who you think's on your level.
Yes, that's true. That's also true.
So it's tough for women out here, I'll tell you.
That's true.
Like that could be very awkward for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have anything else to add to that.
It sounds a lot like we're just kind of shitting on the typical foreign guy who comes and works here.
Yeah.
And to some extent we are, because we've been here long enough that
we know the signs.
We know the stereotype, and we've met the stereotype. But to be fair, like we are a part of that amalgamation. So,
and for me personally as well, let's say this is not my harsh words what I think of you, but let's say you're losing your own country, I couldn't care about that.
Yeah.
If I probably know you from work. Do you work well? Yeah, I don't care about anything else. You're a good guy? I'll go drinking with you.
Right.
I really couldn't care. But if you come here and you say, oh, in America, right, or England, Germany, I struggle to get dates, but here I'm doing all right. And, you know, I got a girlfriend that I really like. For me, I'm like so happy for you.
Right.
Good for you, dude. Like,
Right.
you're making the most of your life. That's what I want for everyone.
Right.
But what I really dislike is those guys who, you know who they are. And they're like trying to play up like, I'm a playboy. Yeah, every weekend, out getting girls. And I'm asking one question that always kills them. Oh, how many girlfriends did you have back home? And they always never answer. Oh, yeah, I did okay.
Yep.
Shut up.
We have a mutual acquaintance like that. He knows who he is.
I know a few people like that. Yeah. And yeah, one last advice before we end this one. If you do decide to come to Japan, even though we've pretty much put you off, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, please come. But if you do and you end up working in the English industry, do not, I repeat, do not touch your students.
Please don't.
Don't do it.
And don't touch your coworkers.
Well, you can touch me. Don't touch your students. There's literally, you know, if you come to Tokyo, the metropolitan has literally 30 million people. You don't need to be getting dates from your students. It never ends well.
Never ends well.
Never.
Yeah.
Say it again. Never ends well.
Don't touch your students and leave your coworkers alone.
Yeah. I mean, feel them out first. They might be into it.
Maybe.
But yeah, don't date at work in general, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I've literally, I know one guy who it worked out well for, and that was it. And like, that was a co-worker, where it was more like same company, not same office.
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
Yep.
But every person who's dated a student is always ended horribly. Mm-hmm. Like, I get it. You don't get to meet people. Go out to the bars by yourself. Try and make friends.
Use Tinder.
Don't use Tinder. I don't recommend that. Like, I don't know. I'm too late to the Tinder game. I don't get it.
That's fine.
So like, Tinder, what was that? Like,
Yeah.
like 50 women and 10,000 guys. Like, what? Meeting strange foreign men. On
Seems
the
like
internet?
it sometimes. Yep.
But yeah, I'll leave it at that on a positive note.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
And yeah, I've really enjoyed this. It went really quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're watching, if you want to know any stuff, yeah, drop a comment. Or I don't know. I've not even named this podcast yet.
Yeah. You can always request Glenn if you want.
Yeah, if you'd like to hear more of Glenn, he's gone to America. But yeah, we've got internet these days. So
Recurring guest.
I'd love to have that. And let's see how it goes. Take care of yourself. And any podcast I do in the future, I'm thinking to have one with some of my Filipino friends and really get their insight, you know, to a lot of the similar stuff we talked about today. And yeah, any kind of information you'd like to know about, I'll try and put some sources or data in the comments.
Thank you for any of the one or two people who might listen to this.
Yeah.
Very kind of you.
My family's huge. If I don't have at least like 5 people, they're all being fucked off for Christmas, I'll tell you that. And yeah, God bless America. Yeah, I fucking said it. All right. Peace out.
Thank you.